The term occultism has been much misunderstood. It may be defined as the study and knowledge of the hidden side of nature by means of powers which exist in all men, but are still unawakened in the majority. Powers which may be aroused and trained in the occult student by means of long and careful discipline and meditation. The goal of the occultist, no less than that of the mystic, is conscious union with God. But the methods of approach are different. The aim of the occultist is to attain that union by means of knowledge and of will, to train the whole nature, physical, emotional, and mental, until it becomes a perfect expression of the divine spirit within, and can be employed as an efficient instrument in the great plan which God has made for the evolution of mankind, which is typified in Masonry by the building of the Holy Temple. The mystic, on the other hand, rather aspires to ecstatic union with that level of the divine consciousness which his stage of evolution permits him to touch. The way of the occultist lies through a graded series of steps, a pathway of initiations, conferring successive expansions of consciousness and degrees of sacramental power. That of the mystic is often more individual in character, a flight of the alone to the alone, as Plotinus so beautifully expressed it. To the occultist, the exact observance of a form is of great importance, and through the use of ceremonial magic, he creates a vehicle through which the divine light may be drawn down and spread abroad for the helping of the world, calling to his aid the assistance of angels, nature spirits, and other inhabitants of the invisible worlds. The method of the mystic, on the other hand, is through prayer and orison. He cares nothing for forms, and, though by his union therewith he too is a channel of the divine life, he seems to me to lose the enormous advantage of the collective effort made by the occultist, which is so greatly strengthened by the help of the higher beings whose presence he invokes. Both these paths lead to God. To some of us, the first will appeal irresistibly, to others the second. It is largely a matter of the ray to which we belong. The one is more outward turned in service and sacrifice, the other more inward turned in contemplation and love. The knowledge of the occultist. The student of occultism, therefore, learns to awaken and train for scientific use the powers latent within him, and by their means he is able to see far more of the real meaning of life than the man whose vision is limited by the physical senses. He learns that each man is in essence divine, a veritable spark of God's fire, gradually evolving towards a future of glory and splendor, culminating in union with God, that the method of his progress is by successive descents into earthly bodies for the sake of experience and withdrawals into worlds or planes which are invisible to physical eyes. He finds that this progress is governed by a law of eternal justice, which renders to each man the fruit of that which he sows, joy for good and suffering for evil. He learns, too, that the world is ruled, under the will of TMH, by a brotherhood of adepts, who have themselves attained divine union, but remain on earth to guide humanity, that all the great religions of the world were founded by them, according to the needs of the races for which they were intended, and that within these religions there have been schools of the mysteries to offer to those who are ready a swifter path of unfoldment, with greater knowledge and opportunities for service, that this path is divided into steps and degrees, the probationary path, or the lower mysteries, wherein the candidates are prepared for discipleship, and the path proper, or the greater mysteries, in which are conferred within the great white lodge itself 5 great initiations, which lead the disciple from the life of earth to the life of adeptship in God, to become a living flame, as it is said, for the lighting of the world. He is taught that God, both in the universe and in man, shows himself as a trinity of wisdom, strength, and beauty, and that these three aspects are represented in the Great White Lodge in the persons of its three chief officers, through whom the mighty power of God descends to man. The Occult Records. It will be seen that this occult knowledge depends no more upon the study of books and records than do the experiences of the mystics. Both belong to a higher order of consciousness, the existence of which cannot be satisfactorily demonstrated on the physical plane. Nevertheless, the study of the physical plane records of the past. Nevertheless, the study of the physical plane records of the past is of value in confirming the historical researches of the trained occultist, who is able to read what are sometimes called the Akashic records, and so to acquire an accurate knowledge of the past. This subject is so little understood that it may perhaps be useful if at this point I quote somewhat at length from a book entitled Clairvoyance, which I wrote many years ago. On the mental plane, the records have two widely different aspects. When the visitor to that plane is not thinking specially of them in any way, these records simply form a background to whatever is going on, just as the reflections in a pier glass at the end of a room might form a background to the life of the people in it. It must always be borne in mind that under these conditions, they are really merely reflections from the ceaseless activity of a great consciousness upon a far higher plane. But if the trained investigator turns his attention specially to any one scene, or wishes to call it up before him, an extraordinary change at once takes place. For this is the plane of thought, and to think of anything is to bring it instantaneously before you. For example, if a man wills to see the record of the landing of Julius Caesar in England, he finds himself in a moment standing on the shore among the legionaries, with the whole scene being enacted around him, precisely in every respect as he would have seen it if he had stood there in the flesh on that autumn morning in the year 55 BC. For example, if a man wills to see the record of the landing of Julius Caesar in England, he finds himself in a moment standing on the shore among the legionaries, with the whole scene being enacted around him, precisely in every respect as he would have seen it if he had stood there in the flesh on that autumn morning in the year 55 BC. Since what he sees is but a reflection, the actors are of course entirely unconscious of him, nor can any effort of his change the course of their action in the smallest degree, except only that he can control the rate at which the drama shall pass before him, can have the events of a whole year rehearsed before his eyes in a single hour, or can at any moment stop the movement altogether and hold any particular scene in view as a picture as long as he chooses. In truth, he observes not only what he would have seen if he had been there at the time in the flesh, but much more. He hears and understands all that the people say, and he is conscious of all their thoughts and motives. And one of the most interesting of the many possibilities which open up before one who has learned to read the records is the study of the thought of ages long past. The thought of the cavemen and the lake dwellers, as well as that which ruled the mighty civilizations of Atlantis, of Egypt, or Chaldea. What splendid possibilities open up before the man who is in full possession of this power may easily be imagined. He has before him a field of historical research of most entrancing interest. Not only can he review at his leisure all history with which we are acquainted, correcting as he examines it the many errors and misconceptions which have crept into the accounts handed down to us, he can also range at will over the whole story of the world from its very beginning, watching the slow development of intellect in man, the descent of the lords of the flame, and the growth of the mighty civilizations which they founded. Nor is his study confined to the progress of humanity alone. He has before him, as in a museum, all the strange animal and vegetable forms which occupied the stage in days when the world was young. He can follow all the wonderful geological changes which have taken place, and watch the course of the great cataclysms which have altered the whole face of the earth again and again. In one especial case, an even closer sympathy with the past is possible to the reader of the records. If in the course of his inquiries he has to look upon some scene in which he himself has in a former birth taken part, he may deal with it in two ways. He can either regard it in the usual manner as a spectator, though always, be it remembered, as a spectator whose insight and sympathy are perfect, or he may once more identify himself with that long-dead personality of his, may throw himself back for the time into that life of long ago, and absolutely experience over again the thoughts and the emotions, the pleasures and the pains of a prehistoric past. The pleasures and the pains of a prehistoric past. In the light of this occult knowledge, which is within the reach of the inner sight, Masonry is seen to be far greater and holier than its initiates appear generally to realize. As tradition has always indicated, it is found to be a direct descendant of the mysteries of Egypt, once the heart of that splendid faith whose wisdom and power were the glory of the ancient world. Those mysteries which were the parent and prototype of the secret schools of other neighboring lands, and its purpose is still to serve as a gateway to the true mysteries of the Great White Lodge.